Okay, so hello everyone. So this is just an informal session just to round up the Reflective Practitioner Professional Placement module, just to go through the assignment with you and give you an opportunity to ask any questions, and I'll try and answer them as clearly as possible. So yes, if you have questions, I can't see the chat bar, so either save them up for when I ask you or shout out, okay? Right, so here we go. So the assessment brief, as you know, it's a portfolio of 6,000 words, and that is to include documentation of 1,500 words or equivalent, and a reflective piece of writing, 4,500 words. So there's text here, which I won't read out because you can read the slides afterwards. But the portfolio then, so the documentation part can be different depending on what your placement was. But if you were doing a teaching placement with the music service, then you have lesson plan templates and you can submit those, and that will be your documentation. I would expect that to come to more than 1,500 words, and that's absolutely fine. If you've been doing another kind of placement, hopefully you will have been filling in a documentation grid or an activity log kind of grid from Moodle, or an equivalent form of documentation. So the idea is that you just basically keep a list of the activities you've done with some brief reflection alongside. And that is to give a kind of timeline of your project, an overview, if that makes sense.
Sorry, Luann, could that be like just a diary of what you've done, like week to week kind of thing? If it's
Yes.
like in yours, yeah, okay.
Yeah, but I would keep it in bullet point form so that it doesn't go too far over the 1,500 words. But if you've been doing, if you've got some extra things such as lesson plans or resources that you've devised or anything like that, you can put those in as well as a kind of appendix. And you should also include the mentor or host feedback pro formas with your documentation if you've managed to get those from your hosts as well. So if you remember in Moodle, there was a feedback pro forma to ask your host to fill in halfway through the placement, which was to sort of give feedback on your sort of performance on your placement up to that point. And then there's another one for the end of your placement. If you didn't get the feedback at the interim period, don't worry, but do download the end of placement pro forma from Moodle and send that to your placement host and get them to fill that in at the end, okay? Because then you can include it with your submission and you can reflect on it, okay? So that's the documentation part. And then the portfolio part, sorry, the essay, reflective piece of writing, I'll go through in a bit more detail on the next slide, the next few slides. But as an overview, the idea is that you reflect on your learning on the placement, and you reflect on what you've learned during the process, and you also integrate that with relevant literature that you might have read on that subject. Okay, so yeah, as I say, we'll go through in a bit more detail now. The deadline is the 28th of April at 12 noon in Moodle. If you have a support summary extension, your deadline is the 12th of May, and you should have already had that date sent to you at the start of the year. To submit it, you download an assignment template from Moodle and you put everything into that document. So you can have if you've got lesson planning, and your documentation log can go into that document along with your essay. If you've got pictures of resources and things like that, you can put screenshots in that document. So ideally everything in one document. If you have trouble doing that, then there should be space on Moodle. There should be the facility to upload a few separate documents as well. So don't worry. Okay, and if you have any issues with uploading things, obviously contact me before the deadline, not at 11:55 a.m. on the 28th of April. Okay, good. So I'm going to go through now in a bit more detail. So the learning outcomes then. So we want you to demonstrate a professional level of engagement and commitment through coherent documentation. So I've just explained what the documentation is about. You can ask me more questions later if you need to, but yeah, it needs to look professional, it needs to look well organised, it needs to look kind of systematic. There's been an organised process through this placement, okay? And the commitment is your regular attendance, isn't it? So it's important to put the dates of your attendance at your placement in there as well as the activity. That's the engagement part, isn't it? The activities that you've taken part in or led or whatever. So the other three learning outcomes are related to the essay, the reflective writing part. So articulate your experience of the chosen setting, so that's where your placement took place, in the context of wider literature, research and or relevant theory. So I'm going to go through these one by one in a minute in more detail. The third one, critically reflect on your progress as a practitioner and formulate a plan for your future professional development in this particular context. So this is where you'll be doing some, you'll be reflecting on the past, what you've done during the module, and thinking about how that impacts your future, I guess, and what your next steps might be. And then the fourth one, deploy appropriate written communication skills. So we just need you to, you know, write it clearly, communicate clearly, have a clear structure. So again, I'll go through that in more detail in a moment. Okay, so first one then, demonstrate a professional level of engagement and commitment through coherent documentation. So we're going to be looking for professional approach. So we'll be looking for how carefully and systematically you organise and present your documentation or your lesson planning or evidence of your resources or whatever is appropriate for your project. And we'll look at how you use or adapt the templates that we've provided on Moodle to communicate what you did, where you did it, when, why, and how. And also some brief reflection on the outcomes, just in bullet points is fine. The timeline should be really easy to follow. So what you did and when. Bullet points are fine because we don't want loads and loads of words in this. It is only 1,500 or equivalent. So if you've got lots of evidence, that is going to take you beyond the 1,500 words. So you can use appendices, but I would urge you to label them carefully and cross-reference to your appendices in your reflective writing. So for example, let's say that you have decided to include evidence of some correspondence that you had with your mentor, let's say, and you could put that in as Appendix A1. Yeah, you could put all of that correspondence in one appendix, and then if you're writing about it in your essay, just put see Appendix A1, that kind of thing. Does that make sense? Any questions?
Can I ask a question? Yes,
yeah,
please.
I'm going to unshare so I can see you. Yeah.
Oh, now I cannot see the slides. So I think my question was about adapting templates. So you were saying that regarding the reflection templates that are on Moodle, which I assume to be the several reflection models, or I'm not sure if that's what you mean.
No, Helena, you don't need, I'm talking about for you, because you've done music service placement, your documentation is the lesson planning templates. Okay. You don't need anything else.
Okay.
Okay, so you don't need to worry. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to carry on sharing. Right, so the next one, articulate your experience of the chosen setting in the context of wider literature, research and/or relevant theory. So we're looking for evidence of your ability to relate theory to practice, or in other words, what you've read to what you've done. Yeah. So if such and such an author talks about something in a certain context, and you can relate what they've said to your experience, you can use what they've said to underpin your reflection, if that makes sense. We need to see that you've used a range of relevant sources to support your arguments. So don't just rely on one book or one journal article. Have a range, okay? And we need to see critical thinking, not just description. So we don't want you to just say, write about on Monday, I did this and this and this and this. Okay, we need to know not just the what, but the why and the how. Okay, so we can talk in a bit more detail about what critical thinking is, and you've read about it. If you've been doing those individual tasks, you have read about critical thinking, and hopefully you've been reflecting on action. So reflecting on what you've been doing after the event, you've been reflecting in action while you've been doing it, yeah, and you've been reflecting for action, reflecting on, reflecting and planning for what comes next. Okay, so you can write about that process in your essay. So a good way to evidence this learning outcome is to combine it with the next one, which is to use literature in a way that relates to your personal experiences. And we want you to reference accurately and consistently. So you should be using the Harvard method, and you can download a guide from this link, and it's also in the Moodle page as well. Okay. I'll keep going for now, and then we can have questions afterwards, I think. That might be easier than me stopping and starting. So critically reflect on your progress as a practitioner and formulate a plan for your future professional development in this particular context. So it's really important in your essay to really demonstrate your self-awareness in order to meet this learning outcome. So highlight what went well in your placement, but also what didn't go so well, and try and identify why that was. And again, lots of evaluation should be going on as you're doing this, not just description. And this is important. So where something didn't go wrong, it's really great if you can show in your assignment how you have accepted responsibility for what has gone wrong. What we don't really want to see in these essays is blaming other people for things that went wrong, or the situation, yeah, or the circumstances, or other colleagues. It's important to think of challenges and things that went wrong as opportunities to learn. So we can learn from the challenges we've encountered, and we can learn from any mistakes we've made. So yeah, what we don't want to see is, oh, that lesson was not very good because it was windy outside and my mentor turned up late and the class just were really misbehaving. What could you have done about it? Yeah, and what didn't you do that you could have done better, and what would you do next time? So it's that kind of thinking. Identify your strengths. We want to really see what you're, you reflecting on what you're good at. So don't be shy about that, but also identifying your weaknesses. Be honest. It might be that your placement has really highlighted strengths that you didn't know you had. It may have also highlighted weaknesses that you didn't know you had. So it's good to talk about both and be really balanced about that. And also talk about whether those strengths and weaknesses have changed during the course of the placement. You might have become much more confident about some things as the weeks have progressed. You might have started out not confident at all, but become really confident by the end. It might have actually gone the other way. You might have thought you were confident about something and then become less confident. But that's also a positive, and we need to think about why that is. Okay. Identify what you've learned. So what additional skills, qualities, and attributes have you developed during the placement, and how have you developed them? And analyse how your learning on the placement has built on what you could do before. So how new skills and so on will be useful to you in the future. And what do you still need to learn, do you think? So setting out a clear action plan and next steps for your future development is really important. So the placement is about a process, a learning process, not necessarily, it's not necessarily all about outcomes, okay? So I would say it's not crucial to have done exactly as you set out to do in your placement, especially if there have been restrictions due to COVID and things like that, okay? It's absolutely fine to say, well, I set out to do this, but it didn't work out this way because, so I did this instead, and turn that into a real positive. You could consider referring to one or more reflective models in the Moodle resources if you want to, or the employability skills checklist. You don't have to use a reflective model. If you prefer to just use your own way of reflecting, that's fine. But if one of those models is helpful to you and you can cite it, it's something else to add into your biography as well, isn't it? One that I cited earlier in this presentation was Schoen's reflective model, which is reflecting on action, reflecting on what happened before, reflecting in action, what's happening right now, and reflecting for action. Excuse me, which is actually an extension of Schoen's model, but means reflecting and planning, using that reflection to plan for next steps and for the future. So that's a simple one you could use, but there might be others that you'd be interested in using as well. And as I mentioned earlier, reflect on written feedback from your mentor or your host and include that reflection from their host pro formas as appendices. The slide has stuck. There we are. So the last bit is about the written communication in your essay. So we need to ensure a clear structure and narrative so that we can read it easily, follow your story easily. It is about telling a story of your experience, really. So when planning your structure, you might find mind maps or lists useful to identify aspects of your placement that and to evidence all the things that we've gone through on the previous slides. Because you've had such a busy time on your placement, it's probably going to be impossible to include everything. We don't expect you to include everything. That's what your documentation's for, just to give an overview of everything. But the essay, you can be more selective. So whatever you decide to do, you need to set out that in your introduction. So set the parameters of your essay in the introduction. So include some brief context, so the details of your placement, where it happened, who you were working with, what your duties or responsibilities were, what your role was, and then what aspects you're going to focus on in the essay and why. And also, this is where you could mention any reflective models you plan to incorporate as you reflect. I'd suggest choosing maybe 3 to 5 key areas to focus on in depth. Or you could adopt a case study approach. So you could use vignettes that feature individual participants you've worked with, for instance. And when I finish with the slides, we could have a chat about your different projects amongst the group and how that could work. Okay. And as I've mentioned already, cross-reference to your documentation or your lesson planning, if that's appropriate, to help the reader link your reflections with your evidence. So see Appendix X and so on. And then in the conclusion, draw the strands together. So this is where you summarise what the key aspects of your learning are. What are the main learning points for you from doing this placement? And also it's where you set your action plan, your next steps. So what have I learned? How is this going to help me in my future career? What am I going to do with what I've learned, and how am I going to apply it in other contexts? It might be that you've already been offered a job or something, or you've been offered some work on the back of your placement, and you could write about that. So that's an interesting angle to take. Or it could be that you are applying for jobs and you're going to use the experience from your placement to help you write your cover letter or whatever, or to enhance your CV. So any of those things could be in this section, for example. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to questions, and I'm going to stop sharing. Okay.
Sorry, Luan, you said to choose 3 to 5 key areas to focus in depth, or adopt a case study with vignettes that features individuals. What is vignettes? I mean, for me, vignettes is from comic books.
Yeah, like a little story, a sort of maybe a paragraph, a scene, if you like.
Okay.
Of a particular, so in your case, Helena, it could be a particular pupil that you've worked with.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, it might be that there was a particular challenge that you helped this pupil to overcome, that you were really proud of the way you handled it, and you might use that pupil.
Mm-hmm.
And I should also say, if you're using names of children and pupils, to anonymise them. So pupil 1, pupil 2, don't use their actual names in your assignment. Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah, but you could do a kind of little overview of the scenario and what happened. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, sure. So for the main body of the essay,
yeah,
is there kind of like a main question that we kind of have to ask ourselves? Like, does there have to be like a title of an essay, in the sense that it's like a big question? Because I know with like the critical thinking, that there are questions that you're going to have to ask yourself that have, I guess, arisen from the academic literature that you're reading, and that's not something that I've got to just yet, but I'm just wondering if there's like an overarching question that you're supposed to ask yourself, or if it is kind of these, yeah, it's just, I guess, reflective. You know,
yeah,
reflecting.
Well, the various reflective models in Moodle give you some ideas of the kinds of questions to ask yourself, but the key ones are: what have I learned? How have I learned it? What have I learned about myself? What have I learned about working with others? In your case, George, because you're working with professionals, aren't you, in an established ensemble? And you know, what have you learned in that context? What were the challenges? Yes. And really sort of dig down into, in your case, it could be digging down into how you've practiced and approached the repertoire, whether that's maybe a changed your approach to practice in general. So yes, you could apply it to wider, you know, the placement. How has that impacted your practice more generally? So you need to define your own questions, is the answer to that.
Sure.
And
okay.
you set the parameters of your essay in the introduction. Yeah. So if you're going to use a reflective model, then you could nick the questions from that or make similar ones up, or you can just design your own questions, but along these sorts of lines. Does that make sense?
No, that's good. That clears things up.
Yeah. So the introduction is basically setting you up for, and setting up the reader for the main body of the essay.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you want to use subheadings in that main body of the essay to help to signpost the reader through that as well, that you can do that.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be good. Yeah. Okay.
It's not
Is it all right if,
Sorry, George.
sorry,
Go.
I was going to ask if it was okay if you go back to the second slide, so I could take a picture of it. I was taking a picture of all of the slides.
It will be.
Sorry.
It will be on Moodle after this session.
Oh, right. Okay.
When you say the second slide, do you mean
Of the main body of the essay? Oh, the 25% to 50% one, I think.
right? So it's basically the first learning outcome is the documentation, and then 2, 3, and 4 are all about the essay. And
Yeah, I was going.
That's 75%. So
Yes, the second one then.
Do you mean the
Sorry,
articulate your experience of the chosen setting?
I believe so. Yes, I think that's the one. Sorry.
Right, let's do that. That one?
Fab, great. That's the one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Jen, hi.
Hi. I don't know if I have the similar question about that slide because due to my placement, I don't think I need to read any article. So is that mean I need to find some article to read by myself, or
yes,
just like
yes, you are required to do some reading. And have you had a chat with Adam about potential literature to read?
Yeah, because when I asked him like if this kind of like academic essay or just a reporter, and then he told me I just need to write what I learned. So he didn't mention about the article. So just want to make sure again because I have a tutorial with him this Friday.
Okay, I'll send him a copy of these slides, and yeah, just so that he so that he can advise you. But yeah,
okay.
he can talk to you about literature searching, so that
Okay.
you can find some relevant literature for your assignment.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I think that what I would have to discuss with you, it probably is more fit for a booking. What do you mean, the personal meeting, or?
Yeah, by all means, email me, Helena.
Because it's more about the details. I tend to over reflect on a lot of things, and I think I'm narrowing. I think I have a few ideas on what to focus on. But I would like to have your opinion on it.
Yeah, sure. I'll be around Monday and Tuesday next week.
Okay, that's great.
Possibly tomorrow, but if you email me later, we'll try and find a time.
Okay.
Send me your availability.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah,
okay.
Okay. Thank
you. Good. Any last questions?
Did you? Sorry. I think George asked if this has to have a name. The essay has to have a name, a title. Does it have to have a title?
It doesn't have to have a title. Sorry if I didn't answer that part of your question, George. You can give it a title by all means, but it doesn't have to have one, no.
Okay.
You can just call it Reflective Practitioner, Reflective Report or something if you want to. But if you've got a question, if you've got a specific question, you know, if something's come out of your assignment and you've got an overarching question that you want to answer, then do that. As long as that's not going to preclude lots of other important things. Sorry, George is trying to speak, and then we'll go to Laura.
That's all right. Yeah. So because you said this all goes into the same point, the same kind of big document, you kind of copy and paste it into this one thing. don't you? So I guess you don't need the title, I suppose.
You don't copy and paste.
Oh, right. Maybe I've misunderstood what you were saying
No,
about
so you've got your documentation, which is an overview of your placement, which basically tells us what you've done each time you've gone to your placement. Yeah.
Yes.
But then the essay is a reflective assignment, and it shouldn't be copying and pasting from the documentation. It shouldn't be duplicating.
No. So no, that's not what I meant. Sorry, I meant as in it all gets submitted into the same point, if that makes sense. As a portfolio, I think.
It's a portfolio. Yeah.
No, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it doesn't need to have a title. It's better in a way for you, I think, to focus on 2 or 3 or 4 aspects of your placement you want to talk about in depth in the essay.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Sorry for that. Cheers.
No worries. Okay, Lauren.
Oh, by the way, Emily, I have a documentation that I have included, like pictures, like close-ups of different excerpts of music that I've been working on with the children at the Junior Conservatoire, as well as about 1,500 words in the documentation part.
Good.
But in the reflective writing part, I've got about 4,500 words, and I was wondering, would it be possible, for example, to do, like, for example, a 2,000 word documentation and a 4,000 word reflective writing, or a 1,000 words documentation and a 5,000 word reflective writing, for instance?
No. No, it's what it says on the assessment brief. 1,500 words documentation, 4,500 essay. If your essay is under or over by about 10% of the word count, that's okay. But no, we can't adjust the proportions, if that makes sense, because one is worth 25% and the other is worth 75%.
Because one is worth 25% and the reflective writing is 75.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah, that's.
But also when you get the grades, when you get the results, do you get separate results for the documentation and the reflective writing, or do you just get the one result for the both?
You'll get an overall mark, but you'll see on your marking criteria that the markers have given a mark for each criteria. That's each worth 25%. So we mark you. That's a very good question.
So you get a breakout.
Yeah, so you get a mark for your documentation, a mark for your for the learning outcome 2, learning outcome 3, and learning outcome 4. So you get a mark for how well written it is and how well communicated it is. You get a mark for how you've applied your how well reflected it is. You get a mark for the integration of literature and so on. And then that's all added up and divided into 4, and you get your overview, your overall mark.
But the other 3 portions of writing outside of the documentation, they're part of the reflective writing.
They're not separate. They're not separate sections, Lauren. You just write one essay, but we're looking for 3 different things within it.
Oh, it's 3 things within it.
You just write one essay, but make sure that you're addressing learning outcomes 2 to 4 in that essay. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, good. Does that make sense to everyone else?
Hi, Leanne. Sorry,
Hi,
it's just going back to the idea of the academic sources and things that we've used. With it being a placement, are we allowed to use kind of say like you've used like Paul Harris techniques and things like that, and included like Diana Swaboba and all that in your teaching? Is that kind of what you mean, or do you mean like written sources that we must include in terms of if we found a journal article and we've said we could have looked at this in order to get this result kind of thing?
Yeah, so if it's resources such as if you've used some Paul Harris techniques. Yes.
I'm really sorry, I can't hear you because someone else is
Lauren.
Okay. Ah, thank you. Sorry.
Oh, Lauren's turned her mic off again now. Thank you, Lauren. Sorry, distracted.
No,
Yes, so if, for instance, you're using some Paul Harris simultaneous learning approaches, as long as you cite from a relevant publication, so that you can reference that approach, that's fine.
Perfect. Yeah, that's okay. It was just to get a bit of clarity on that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and let's say, for example, this is completely off the top of my head example. Let's say that you're teaching in a school and you were working with a pupil who wasn't very motivated to practice. You might then go to literature on practice and motivation, right, and use that to underpin some of your arguments and reflections. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you very much.
Okay. Or at Junior Conservatoire, if you're coaching groups, you might look up some literature on ensemble, the benefits of ensembles, or, just group teaching, or, if you've been observing the conductors, then you might look up some literature on conductors. You just have to do some keyword searches to find literature that might be relevant. Yeah,
that's perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, good. Any other questions? So I would just say then that you can contact your tutor to book a tutorial if you haven't already done so, if you just want to have a chat about your bespoke project. So you all know who your individual tutors are, so get in touch with them, but bear in mind that they might be on leave for at least part of next week, so act very quickly if you need that input before you start your essay, or before you refine your essay if you've already drafted something. Okay. Great. Well, it's really nice to see you all. I hope that's been helpful, clarified a few things. Have a lovely Easter break when that comes. Next week is off timetable or a private study, so you don't need to be here. But it's a perfect time to get on with your essay, maybe. But have a
no, sorry. I am going to be here next week because I'm going to be watching a few concerts here next week.
Jolly good. Well, enjoy those then, Lauren.
Will do.
Have a good break, everybody. Okay.
Good break to you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.